Hello, I'm here with Doug to talk about Scattered Spider and other things. It is Friday, May 16, 2025. And I've got a bunch of silly politics. First, the you probably saw this. I just saw this. James Comey is now under federal investigation because he took a walk on the beach and somebody left some seashells there spelling out 8647. And he took a photo of that, posted it like on Twitter or something. And they're seriously saying this is a death threat against Trump. So makes me tempted to get a hat with 8647 on it. But anyway, although it would probably count as terrorism now. And in the same spirit, somebody tried to import a bunch of T-shirts with featuring a swarm of bees attacking a cop, and also something that said "Eliminate ICE." And they froze them all. They're going to destroy them or ship them back to China as apparently illegal in America. Seems to me like you'd hit the First Amendment issues here, but maybe I'm just out of date.
Wait, T-shirts with bees?
Yeah, bees attacking a cop, and another slogan that said "Eliminate ICE." So they are shirts critical of police and capitalism. And
In cold drinks.
well, yes, they did in fact have a picture of like an iceberg, but I think they made it somehow clear that it was the immigration authority they were targeting. But anyway, they're all being shipped back or destroyed, and like I say, it's probably illegal. I would think. I think we have freedom of speech here, and I think it covers like satire and art and stuff. But what do I know? I'm real out of
Yeah, but I'm wondering, um, it's being imported.
right. Maybe there's some
So,
maybe there
yeah,
maybe there's no First Amendment protection for that. That I don't know. Maybe if you made them here, I'm not sure.
yeah. And if they made them here,
Hmm.
it would cost a lot more.
Well, it would cost a lot more. That's why I remember AOC sells like branded merchandise and like her hoodie costs like $70 and they say, "What's up with that?" And she said, "Well, I'm not really to underpay the staff. My stuff is expensive. Can we make it here?" I think so. Um, there was a guy that tested this. I saw an article. He said, "Will people pay more for something made in America?" So he had some product and he made it in America. It cost more and nobody would buy it. Everybody wanted the cheap one from China. As if this is a surprise, but they're claiming people will gladly pay more for the tariffs. He said, "I don't think so."
Yeah, interesting, huh?
Yeah, this one I thought was pretty interesting. China, China is the main polluter of the world. They're just a lot bigger than the US. And they now have had their emissions growth finally drop because,
Oh,
like I said, just like us, it's not do-gooding, it's that renewables are cheaper. So they now make 13%, they now have a spectacular rate of renewable energy. They now have more renewable capacity than the next 13 countries combined, four times that of the US. And but their emissions total have been growing so fast, but now their emissions have finally dropped 1% compared to the previous year because they're just deploying so much renewables. So, I think people are on ground on track for like zero carbon by like 2060 or something, which means there'll be a whole lot of more harm done. But that seems to be all anybody willing to put up with in terms of current pain to stave off future pain.
yeah, that is pretty interesting, about China.
Yeah.
California worked
Yeah.
in the 50s and 60s to reduce emission with a lot of resistance. And we finally did it. And our air, right? We used to, at least Northern California, we'd have smog alerts all the time
Yeah.
over the summer. And other than the fires recently, there haven't been any smog alerts.
Yeah.
That I'm curious when the last one was, but I think it was probably late 70s, early 80s.
I used to remember spare the air alerts quite frequently, even like 5 or 7 years ago. So there are times when there's like an inversion, and so the ozone builds up, and they ask you to not drive your car. So there are occasions where the air is supposedly bad for you. I never noticed it, except when a couple of days when there was a fire and you couldn't even see the sun.
Yeah, so I remember growing up in the East Bay, and if you were in the, say, Oakland, Berkeley Hills, you couldn't see San Francisco because of that black, or brownish, greenish, yellowish, greenish smog.
Yeah.
And you could barely see the Golden Gate Bridge or Bay Bridge
Yeah.
on
Well,
some days.
I think for one thing, there's no factories belching smoke anymore. And for another thing, that
Yeah.
cars have basically no exhaust anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the credit goes to the car emissions,
I think,
which the car companies and the other 49 states fought
and they're
until
fighting back now. The Trump administration is pushing hard to
yeah,
California's right to have separate smog requirements. So we'll see.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They may
But
federal,
New York and several states in the Northeast also banned with California to reduce smog. But
yeah.
California's was the most stringent.
And I know New York has really strict gun control laws, which is another thing I'd expect the Republicans to target, although I haven't heard any recent news about them having success in that area. But
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Control has kind of faded away.
but it's very strong in New York City. I remember I listened to Michael Cohen, and he was one of the 1,000 people allowed to carry a concealed weapon in New York City. It's very hard to get a permit to carry a gun in New York City, which the Republicans regard as a violation of the Second Amendment. And you could make that argument.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Long, long, interesting history, right?
Yeah, it's we originally, the Second Amendment was passed at a very different time and reinterpreted like about 20 years ago by the pro-gun people to have an outrageous meaning far beyond its original one. They're just supposed to be part of like the National Guard, a well-organized militia with like a musket. And that doesn't mean every single person should have an AK-47, which is what
Yeah,
they turned it into.
yeah. Well, do you know, Sam, in the 1960s, well, the NRA, National Rifle Association,
Yeah.
that was founded after the Civil War.
Oh,
And for roughly about 100 years, give or take, the NRA was just a magazine talking about guns and, yeah, not radical, but just here's the latest gun and, this is how you clean your gun.
yeah.
And the reason it was created is because the Northerners weren't as familiar with guns as the Southerners.
Oh boy.
And so they wanted to be prepared in case another, I don't know, Civil War came out that, or war in general, that people were familiar with guns. So around 19 mid 60s, early 70s, the NRA was taken over because they had kind of run their they'd kind of done their thing. People weren't that interested anymore. And there was a coup, there was a takeover to make the NRA all political and a Second Amendment right that
Yeah.
was not part of the original NRA. And that's kind of the NRA that we have today.
Yeah,
And
I think it's kind of like, there was a genre of fiction that came out with Dan Brown where you'd write these things like with a religious meaning and pretend they were really true. And a lot of movements discovered that you could just add politics to it and tie it to
right.
like a conspiracy theory, and it's a new way to become popular,
Yeah.
to create
Yeah.
a sort of science fiction alternate world people can live in.
Yeah. And so today, and if you take a look at what the NRA, they shortened the Second Amendment and they leave off the second half of the sentence.
Right, as part of a regulated militia.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Right.
right is so the right to bear arms is what everybody hears. And
Yeah,
but the well-regulated militia has been
yeah,
dropped by the NRA.
I know.
Yeah, I'll tell you something else that's interesting is that the high school where my kids went to school, they had a gun locker, and people, meaning students, would bring their guns to school.
Really?
They put them into a gun locker, and then during PE, they'd take them out and they'd practice shooting.
Wow, that's surprising. What weird year was that?
So this school was built, well, it opened in the 60s, but it would have been designed late 50s.
I can't
And the gun locker is still there.
I can't imagine any school willingly having students shooting guns on campus these days. I think everyone would go nuts.
Or yeah, these days. But yeah, the locker is still there and it's guns.
Yeah.
So the other one that's kind of interest, well, the other part of this is what did the girls do? What did the women do? Do you
Did
remember?
did they have guns too? They might have. I don't know.
Nope, but they did have weapons. Well,
Oh, I don't.
so the men, the boys would be shooting guns, and the women, it was archery.
Oh, I
They had targets,
I never
right?
heard of that. I mean, archery is a fine sport, but it's not a practical self-defense technique.
No, but it was kind of, the analog, if you would, for women was
I,
archery.
well, if I was a woman, I would complain anyway.
Well, times have changed, but
Yeah, yeah.
that was, now they don't do PE anymore, or they do a little bit, but it's
Oh,
it's not like what it used to be when I was in school.
when I went through it was all pretty much football, and I was pretty disgusted by it. Anyway,
Yeah, football was big.
yeah.
Now it's soccer.
Well, that's probably better than football. Anyway,
Yeah.
I thought this was pretty cute. You know that Wisconsin judge that got arrested because she let the guy in her courtroom go out the back door in an attempt to evade the ICE people who did catch him.
Yes.
She's defending herself on the grounds that the immunity decision of the Supreme Court giving Trump immunity for all of his official acts is actually apparently based on a pre-existing condition that gives judges immunity for their official acts. Because obviously judges make decisions and then people get mad, and you can't sue a judge for that decision. She's defending herself in part based on Trump's Supreme Court immunity decision. So I thought that's pretty good.
That's going to be an interesting one. Yeah, you are correct.
Yeah.
But what's she being is she being charged?
He's being charged, I think, with a felony, helping someone evade capture.
Oh,
Because remember, the whole thing about the Trump administration is to blow up this illegal immigration thing to where it's an invasion, it's a war, they're taking it super, and any attempt to block us is like felony. They're super hyping it up, just like McCarthy hyped up his communist threat. This justifies everything, this terrible invasion of immigrants that's destroying everything.
yeah. Well, you know what's doing, Sam?
I don't know what it's doing. Terrifying
Ha-
students, one thing, and driving
Yeah, well,
tourists.
yeah, that's one thing. But what's the younger generation complaining about housing? Now housing prices are going up.
Well, they're right about that. It costs too much to live in America.
Well, no, but they're going up because we don't have an illegal workforce.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's right. So the value they contribute to our economy exceeds the amount they consume by living somewhere, which is just what everyone said. They said if you actually got rid of the immigrants, our economy would be destroyed because nobody would be around to do all the rotten work, like
Who
pick
who wants
stuff
yeah, who wants to pick strawberries?
or clean hotel rooms or lots of things, or provide, home health care to old people that need like a,
Yeah.
yeah, I know it's, anyway, uh, XAI, is a Grok. That's Elon Musk's Grok that's supposed to be the unwoke thing. It's got another new problem. He was getting mad at it because it would tell the truth instead of the lies he wanted it to tell. And so, apparently he complained and they tried to upgrade it because now, for a few days, no matter what you ask it, it will tell you about white genocide in South Africa. You can ask it for like a recipe for soup and it will tell you about white genocide in South Africa. Then they turned that off again. But that's one of his myths. That's like a Tucker Carlson thing. Um, uh, the idea that the white people are being oppressed in South Africa, and we're now officially taking white South African refugees from this, which caused the Episcopal Church to cancel their contract with our immigration to help immigrants, saying we will have no part of this.
Yeah, Sam, can you review that with me? What the heck's going on there?
Other nations in Africa, like Liberia, I know, and I think maybe Zimbabwe, when the black people finally took political power, they did take revenge on the white people and confiscate their land and stuff. Say
Wait, they did?
they did in other nations.
but
in
not
white
South Africa.
not in South Africa. But Elon Musk started this myth that they did because, he was raised in South Africa under apartheid and his family left when apartheid ended, which is why he's still a big, uh, what the term, a eugenicist. He totally believes race determines everything, genes
Hmm.
determine everything, like they did. That's why he's actually an open Nazi. All he lies. The one thing you can tell Nazis when they claim they're not a Nazi. It's sort of like alcoholics. Anyway, so
Yeah.
he
Okay.
anyway, um, so he believes that there's this huge genocide of white people in South Africa. This is apparently debunked because I'm
Ah, I see. I
yeah,
see.
but he's
So
pushing it.
the
Yeah.
so they're political refugees that are coming to the US and they happen to be white, not
Well, they're
black.
white and they're claiming that they're fleeing persecution in South Africa for being white.
Yeah, okay, okay.
And
And
apparently,
so is the US letting them in?
oh yeah, yeah, Trump started a program. There's like 50 of them who come in or something. They're the only immigrants he likes.
I see. I see.
They're getting
So
like
my
they got like money from the government and to help them resettle here and stuff.
Yeah, so from what I understand, I know a couple South Africans.
Yeah.
It's not things aren't that great there right now.
Well, maybe not. I don't know. I haven't heard anything recent about what's going on there.
Yeah, yeah. So the economy isn't doing well. Inflation has kicked in. It's quality of life has decreased a bit.
Yeah. Well, that's
So,
probably why they're leaving.
okay.
Yeah. So I just mentioned a couple others that were kind of one more worth mentioning. In Oklahoma, they have now passed education standards saying students must learn about the 2020 election fraud, which doesn't exist, but it's going to exist in the history books in Oklahoma. So this is one of the classic things fascist governments do is rewrite history. So anyway,
Yes, okay.
then I got a whole bunch of privacy issues. I mean, a whole section of them because there's so many things. The KOSA bill is coming back, Kids Online Safety Act. This was pushed a few
Uh-oh.
years ago and pushed back by the privacy advocates like the EFF, and it's come back with minor changes, which the EFF says are not good enough. And the point is, it establishes a duty of care, and all the providers of internet websites have a care to care for kids, so they have to not do anything that might possibly harm the kids, but that's totally vague. So what it means is everybody will just have to censor the hell out of everything because anything they say, somebody could complain, sort of like copyright. So they say
Yeah.
press
Yeah.
lawful important speech online, especially for young people. So forums won't be able to host posts with messages like love your body or please don't do drugs or here's how I got through depression without fearing that an attorney general or an FTC lawyer might later decide the content was harmful. That's, this is the endless thorny issue of content moderation. We we would sort of like to remove bad content from the web, but the problem is there seems to be no good way to define what bad content is or establish some authority with the right to determine what it is. Nobody seems to be getting anywhere on this issue. We're all just spinning our wheels.
Well, Sam, I think the Supreme Court, there was a judge that made a ruling on that years ago, and it was, I know it when I see it.
Well, yeah, that's we never seem to get beyond that, which is pretty useless.
Yeah, yeah,
And I know as you in colleges, education institutions are just as soon as one person complains, they take everything down or something. That's
yeah, they fold. Yeah,
because
yeah,
they just don't want any controversy. Anyway, and then so Dearborn, which I think is in Michigan,
yeah.
they've made a 5-year contract with Axon's Fusus program. And what this does is the government spends $720,000 and individual people are supposed to pay to buy special cameras, which will then feed the data to the cops. And so people opt into the program. This reminds me of when those Google doorbells came out. And for a while, all of them were sending data to the cops. But apparently it's popular, they've approved it, so they're going to just have more cameras everywhere. I guess this is one way to fight crime. It's also, of course, a somewhat of a privacy invasion, but they have said it only looks at public space. You don't have an expectation of privacy, so we don't need a search warrant or anything. So we'll see what comes of that.
So, and what's the story again? The
Just
private citizens are buying cameras.
know that the police The city council has paid for the police to buy their end, and they're asking citizens to buy the other end and hook it up so they have a surveillance network, which they can connect to the license plate readers, I think. Oh, that's another one. There's a similar one about, there's another article, a company called Flock that has deployed these automatic license plate readers everywhere. They now want to connect it to cameras. They have cameras and license plate readers, and they now want to connect it to people lookup system, which includes data from data brokers and stolen data from data breaches to look up everything. So you can find out who someone is, who their relatives are, who they're associated with. And the problem is all done without any search warrant or probable cause.
Yeah.
And it's already being used by
Okay.
some law enforcement agencies. So this is all 1984 Big Brother kind of stuff.
Yeah. So it is interesting. I know of some people who live in Oakland and they're buying the flock cameras to put them up.
Well, if I lived in a high crime area, I would probably be inclined to do it too. This is the issue. Will you put up with more privacy invasion to lower crime? And people will if the crime is bad enough. Like I understand in Britain, when Snowden revelations came out, they'd interview people in the street and they said, I don't care if the government reads all our email or all our web traffic. They can totally do that if it will stop the terrorism because they have a lot more terrorism over there.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
just that trade, right, between freedom and security.
Yeah, it is interesting. But they can be circumvented, stolen plates. We're
Sure.
seeing a lot of that going on, or people covering plates.
Yeah.
What else are we seeing? We're also seeing flashlights that people are taking flashlights, they blind the cameras.
Oh, and I think we talked about it about a month ago. There was a special license plate cover with like a door that slides down over your plate,
Yeah.
and they're trying to ban it, but apparently people are buying it. So you can just cover up your plate when you feel like doing the dirty.
Yeah, or you do the James Bond where the license plate flips, rotates.
Well, that would really be illegal. This thing was technically not illegal. They're trying to make it illegal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because technically, you're
Yeah.
only supposed to use it to cover the plate like when your vehicle is not moving, I guess. Um,
Oh, see, there's a legal use for it.
well, actually, I'm not sure it's okay to, I know I see cars with like a canvas cover over the car and they paint the license plate number on it because I think, in fact, in the city, it's not legal to cover up your plate even when it's parked. They're supposed to be able to like give you a ticket, see the plate for that
Yeah,
purpose.
but what if it's being towed? Meaning it's on a tow truck or a flatbed tow,
Well, I don't
right?
know. I don't think that would matter because that's temporary. But I think it's not legal to cover up your plate in motion or when towed or when parked, but I'm not
Hmm.
sure. Anyway,
I don't know, but I think it varies from state to state, probably.
sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, I got a positive privacy story. Tor, the anonymity
yep.
network has added a new feature. There's a tool called ONIUX, UNIUX, like Linux, and this runs any Linux app and isolates it from all the other apps and sends all the data through Tor. And it does it by defining, okay, it places each app in its own network namespace with no access to the host's interfaces and instead attaching a virtual interface that routes through Tor. So this setup ensures leak-proof kernel-enforced Tor isolation for any Linux app. So it sounds pretty clever. Each app can reach the internet, but only through its own encrypted channel and can't leak to the other apps unless someone can compromise the kernel.
So is it something like a Docker? It
Yeah,
sounds like.
yeah, it's sort of like a virtual environment. There's
Yeah.
a virtual cage they used to call it or something. Yeah, it's like that. But anyway, the point is the running process can get to the internet, but it's not able to reach any other processes on the machine. That's the idea. Does sound pretty good. So even if you got it attacked through one process, it wouldn't be able to get the other processes, supposedly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but then we have the issue where the CPUs can be compromised.
Yes, there's yet another
Yeah.
Spectre vulnerabilities come out, which again is going to slow our machines down by like 2 to 8% to patch it. Uh,
And question I have for you on that, do you have to have physical access to the machine or can that be through software?
It can be through software. All the Spectres have. The demos show them like opening a browser page and finding your secrets in the browser page. It's this one, I haven't seen a demo of exactly this one, but I know most of them are remote. They can run software on the machine, and it can then see stuff it's not supposed to have the privileges to see, like administrative
Okay.
level stuff.
And we're talking, is this the microcode in the CPU?
No,
Ah,
this is a speculative execution flaw. All they have to do is execute a series of instructions which get it to expect a certain path from a branch, and then
yeah,
give it some instructions where that expected path leads beyond a security boundary, and they can then interrogate the cache and find out some of the data that it got from a few instructions where it wasn't supposed to go. And they were able to pump something like 5 kilobits per second out of the protected area so they can totally dump the contents of a password file or something.
yeah, yeah. But what about the CPUs, the Intel CPUs with the code that could be compromised?
Yes, that was a flaw in the signature of the code, and there's a microcode update to fix it. And apparently, I was just talking to Paul about this a couple of days ago. Apparently, you can just get like normal Windows updates, and they can patch the microcode in the processor.
Ah,
You don't need to do
okay.
something special. So apparently, the various OSs people are developing patches. So I guess it'll be all right. But it does point out a weak spot. And just like, although I said, the most important weak spot is now the edge of your network, the routers, switches, firewalls,
Yeah.
concentrators, all those things are getting hacked. And right now, there really isn't much of a way for defense for them. We really need that.
So you need a firewall for the firewall.
Yeah. Well, I what you need is integrity on the firewall. And I think
Yeah.
tripwire would be the thing. But anyway, we need some kind of controls there. Yeah. So,
Okay. What else we got?
well, I now to the InfoSec, and this is the one I thought was most important. Scattered Spider has that name because it's a big, loose assembly, sort of like Anonymous, of all these people at various skill levels, but they're all criminals and they work together to ransomware people and steal their data. And they've been really powerful, and and Google warns that they are um, aggressive, creative, and particularly effective at circumventing mature security programs. And they've been hacking. What they do is they focus on one sector and attack a bunch of big companies in that one sector for a couple of years before they move on to the next. Now they're attacking retail, and they took down a UK retail giant called M&S, and they've been down for about a month trying to,
What?
yeah, and there are huge problems. Kevin Beaumont's been posting about this on Mastodon a lot. He used to work, I think, in security at M&S. He knows what's going on. Their servers have been down, their shopping have been down, they froze hiring, uh, and they've been going through stages of gradually revealing how bad it all is. It's real bad. And now they say they're going to target US stores. And so US retail stores should expect dangerous hacks from these people who are pretty dangerous. And they were kind of they're all these are the same people in 2023 that hacked the casinos in Las Vegas, MGM Resorts and Cedars Entertainment.
That's right. I remember that. Yeah.
Yes, so they're a big, dangerous criminal group. And I think they caught some of them, but apparently not them all. And
Hmm.
they're still at it, and they're going to expect them to target the US soon. So people should be aware of that. That's why one thing I heard talk about, which I thought is pretty clever, is you should have an instant response drill where you practice your procedures to isolate your network. How do you respond quickly where you have to somehow break all the connections between your network? You should have a, sort of red button on the wall you can press to isolate your network segments quickly when you get infected by something like this, which is a pretty good idea. I've never heard of people having exactly that drill. I have heard that there are tabletop exercises where you just get the managers to talk about how you're going to respond, and they say those really help, where you'll know who's in charge, who's making a decision, where's the weak spot. And
Hmm.
a lot of companies haven't done that at all. But he said companies should have a plan how to quickly segment their network to stop the spread of ransomware.
Yeah. So M&S is Marks and Spencer.
Yeah. Apparently it's big.
And yeah, they're kind of like Macy's, if you will, in the US,
Yeah.
or kind of a blend between Macy's and Target.
Yeah. And I guess
Hmm.
they're losing a lot of money.
But they're all shut down, huh?
I think they're slowly recovering. Some servers,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
large portions of it have been down for weeks.
I
Um,
see.
yeah. And in France, they're getting a lot of people getting kidnapped to ransom for their cryptocurrency. And they'll do things like kidnap your father and cut off his fingers and nail them to you and demand a cryptocurrency payoff. They've done and kidnapped several people. People are freaking out in France. And so I think the government issued an official statement. Cryptocurrency is not untraceable. We will find you. But uh,
Right, right.
but anyway, that's a big issue. That's why, people that have large cryptocurrency investments should really be private about that. Um, and Waymo, their cars are all over San
Yep.
Francisco now. They've recalled 1,200 cars because apparently they get confused when you have gates and chains, and there are a bunch of low-speed collisions with gates and chains. They try to drive through them, I guess. There've been a handful of accidents like that, not hurting anybody, but it means they're trying to do a software upgrade to more accurately detect those things. That would make total
I
sense.
see.
These little barriers that aren't really like a solid barrier or a car or anything, your camera isn't sure what to make of it.
Got it. Got it.
And this one here, I thought you might be able to help me understand. Um, I think this is Reuters said they have a, yeah, it's Reuters. Some people talked to them and said they examined the equipment from power inverters. And power inverters, which are mainly produced in China, are used throughout the world to connect solar panels and wind turbines to electricity grids. They're also found in batteries, heat pumps, and electrical vehicle chargers. And they have found some of these that have extra unauthorized hardware in it that will send data out, presumably back to China without you knowing that. And they say these things are often deployed with firewalls, but these extra communications devices will go past the firewall. So they found the undocumented communication devices, including cellular radios, have been found in some batteries from multiple Chinese suppliers and power inverters. So they suspect that they're selling devices which have the ability to be remotely turned off from China. So we pre-hacked our power grid.
So who's reporting this, Sam?
A couple of people anonymously that claim to be inspecting these things. And they only have a few instances, and it's not clear how many there are. The thing that strikes me about this is it reminds me of the big Bloomberg headline story from 5 years ago, where they said that all the iPhones had secret extra hardware chips in it so China could control your phone. And it turned out to be completely bogus. And I don't think the thing that bothers me about this is there's no need to do this. You can totally hack the power grid. It's pretty much defenseless. You don't need to stick rogue hardware in it to hack it.
Yeah, I think this is somebody that found something that's legitimate, that's trying to turn it into something sinister.
That's what I wondered. Yeah. I
And here's the real question.
yeah.
So they have cellular hardware in there.
Yeah.
Who's going to pay the bill?
Yeah, that's an issue. Yeah, that's right. It's
Who are they going to communicate with?
yeah.
Can they, that would mean that China, these people in China, have to have hacked the cellular system to get free cell phone service.
Yeah, I've seen over the last 6 years, I've seen an endless chain of these articles that just seem to be basically just anti-China racism, just claiming that China is doing something bad with sort of flimsy, bogus sounding evidence because they just think it'll sell more papers to be angry at China. Because we're all supposed to hate,
Yeah,
the way when I was a kid, we were all supposed to hate Russia. Now we're all supposed to hate China.
but we get a vast amount of merchandise from China.
I know. Whereas I never knew why we were always supposed to be afraid of Russia. I mean, the USSR was pretty scary, threatening us with nuclear missiles all the time, and Putin's threatening us with them, but nobody takes it seriously anymore. But
Yeah. So here's the thing. I will tell you that these inverters, at least on the solar side, do have cellular modems.
oh,
And the reason that they have them is because when the power grid goes down, you need to make sure that the solar system has been shut off so it doesn't backfeed the grid and electrocute the power workers who are working on the power lines to restore power.
okay. Well, then maybe this guy's just misunderstanding legitimate stuff.
That's why I'm saying I think that this might be somebody taking something and turning it into something sinister.
Yeah.
The one in EV chargers, that could be there so that you can do billing. So if you put it into a public location,
Yeah.
like in a like at a store,
Yeah.
a store parking lot, that you have billing capability. I mean, how else would you communicate?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Or you put one in a hotel and
Yeah.
it's operated by a third party. Somehow it's got to communicate to charge people and make sure that everything is working okay. Report the status of if the charger's defective,
Yeah.
how much electricity it's being used,
Yeah.
and report back to the app. So I guess I'm not buying it.
Yep.
I'm skeptical, but I'd like to see additional information on it.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see what, if anything comes out of it. Um,
Yeah.
I imagine it'll just vanish. It seems like kind of not enough evidence here to really justify being
And
free.
and what are you going to get? I mean, you could turn it into a botnet, but cellular
Well,
data, low
if you
speed.
really manage to deploy these things with hardware Trojans everywhere, then you could use them to take down the power grid. But you'd really have
Why
to.
would you use personal computers and routers?
Well,
Well, I mean,
use this. Well, if there was some back channel to China, they would be in control of our power grid. But I think we already know they are in control of our power grid by hacking this stuff, just like we're in
yeah,
control of theirs.
yeah.
So,
So Sam, I don't know. This kind of brings up another terrorist story.
yeah.
But are you familiar of the shootings of the PG&E transformers?
Well, I heard about some a few years ago.
Yeah, yeah. So this is somebody that apparently knows where a vulnerable spot on these transformers are.
Yeah.
So it's not the story that I've been hearing is it's not a random shooting.
Right.
It's pretty deliberate because
Yeah.
there's only one shot and it takes out the transformer.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. There have been some
Yeah,
sabotage by someone that clearly knows how to do it, but it hasn't really hit enough to make huge outages or anything.
right, right. And
Yeah,
I know
really,
if
if you wanted to be like a subversive group, like one of those angry militia groups, you could use this technique to make a political statement or something, but it doesn't seem to have been organized enough to do that yet.
yeah. And if you go back to the 60s, I know that some of the PG&E high voltage transmission lines that crisscross the state, they were targeted.
Yeah.
And in the East Bay over in, let's see, I guess that's Contra Costa County. I don't know if you know this, but there's a whole network of pipelines that transport fuel up and down the state.
Oh,
And if you think about it, San Francisco Airport, how do they get their fuel for the jet planes?
well, I remember the Colonial pipeline on the East Coast.
Yeah.
I used to take it down, I think, with ransomware, and that fouled up all the gas flow. I guess we must have something similar on the West Coast.
Well, what we have is from Bakersfield to Chico, we have pipelines to pump gas and av fuel and aviation fuel, different products.
Yeah.
But think about if we didn't have those, the number of gasoline truckers,
Yeah.
tankers that would have to go to San Francisco Airport or any major airport every day.
I don't think I've seen a gasoline tanker on the road in years. There aren't very many of them running. We must have pipes moving all that fuel.
Well, yeah, yeah. From Chico,
Yeah.
the refineries are in Richmond, Martinez, and there's a pipeline. There are a couple pipelines that pump again up to Chico and down to Bakersfield.
Yeah.
And from there, they have distribution points. But to get that long haul, if you will, kind of like a rail backbone.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. And it goes under the bay. So one of them used to cut through, let's see, Oakland, that went out to Martinez, and it went through, what did that be? Redwood Regional Park, some of the parks up in the Oakland Hills. And one night, there's an area where the pipeline was exposed. Somebody used two charges of dynamite and blew up two different pipelines.
Yeah, it would seem like an obvious target in the realm of like critical infrastructure, a way to,
Right.
because I know this is part of the CIA book, how to like overthrow a government. You just find something important and trash it just so people get unhappy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the person that blew it up, they have no idea who did it. And there was a worker for the refineries. He was one of the first people on site. to try and control it, he wound up getting badly burned and succumbing to his burns.
Well, that's another point. You could go to a remote location to perform your sabotage so you wouldn't get caught because there won't be any cameras or cops there or anything.
Right,
Yeah,
right, right, right.
yeah. Reminds me of the tree spikers. Yeah.
Yeah.
You get to go up into some rural area and do something which you probably won't get caught unless you like go out of your way to get caught.
Yeah, and so what they were doing is nailing nails or large spikes into trees.
Right.
So when the chainsaw hit them, it would, I guess, pull it out and potentially injure the person.
Yeah,
Um,
apparently. But I've heard at the time was they just wanted to break the chainsaws, but apparently it can kill the lumberjack,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
not really what they wanted, I think, but certainly not a good thing. That's not going to help your cause. Um, yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, I got Google. About a year or two ago, Apple added this enhanced security mode you can turn on in your phone in case you're worried about being hacked by Pegasus. And Google has now introduced their version of this called Advanced Protection Mode, and it is intended to stop the mercenary spyware from NSO, which I think is Pegasus. Um, and so it makes your phone so you cannot connect to 2G networks, which are unsafe. You can't connect to Wi-Fi networks that are protected by no encryption or WEP. You have a memory tagging extension to prevent memory corruption attacks. It automatically locks your phone when it's offline for an extended period. It automatically powers down your device when it's locked for prolonged periods. Does some kind of intrusion logging to some special protected memory, which supposedly is hard to wipe. I'd like to know more how that works. And it
Right,
has
yeah.
JavaScript protections to block some JavaScript exploits, which are apparently part of the NSO stuff. So this is good. I have a whole bunch of students that appear to be infected by this stuff or something like it. Their phones are infected by something nasty that we can't get off. And these privacy modes may help.
Yeah, but yeah. So again, we're balancing security with
Yeah,
functionality.
both of
Yeah,
them, they say some features will stop working if you turn this on. But I've heard people report I turned it on and it was okay, didn't break anything important. It's intended for like journalists and people working for government and military, people in
I
relatively
see.
people who are like at high risk of being attacked by expensive malware should turn on this fancy mode if they want to have more protection against it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, and we've already talked about my last story, which was the branch privilege injection, uh, the one that lets your CPU read memory past a security barrier. The
Yeah.
latest, it just remember when Spectre and Meltdown were found, it must be about 8 or 10 years ago now. They said we can't really fix this without a new generation of processors, and all the patches are incomplete, and so there's just been an endless chain of a new way to do it because none of the patches really stop it. We have had enough time to have a whole new generation of processors, but Intel processors just keep seeming to stay vulnerable. This one does not affect ARM, but this
Yeah. Right.
speculative
Right.
execution thing seems to just create holes that we really can't patch very well.
I see.
But I
I
guess
see.
everyone wants it because it adds a lot to performance. So
Yeah. Have you been following the Google trial?
I saw a couple articles about it. I wasn't sure what to make of them. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I was trying to do a little bit of research, and it's my understanding, I think there's a ruling against Google that they are a monopoly. And now the question comes down to what's the action that's going to be taken?
Well, the action is to bribe Trump to make it go away, just like
Exactly.
Ashcroft did in like 1998 or so, or 2000, back when it was Ashcroft. I mean, this is when Republican administrations get in. You just bribe them and it just goes away, I would think.
Yeah, and Sam, I keep wondering about this. How come Elizabeth Holmes hasn't made a contribution? I mean, she has a husband that's got the money.
Trump pardoned all kinds of other criminals, even the guy that Blagojevich, that was
Yeah, Blagojevich got pardoned.
he's willing to pardon white collar criminals of the other party and everything. So yeah, all you got to do is send the right bribe to Trump and he'll give you a pardon. I guess she
Yeah,
doesn't have a good advisor. She's wasting her money doing other things.
yeah. I mean that because she's behind bars for another 10 years or so.
Yeah. Well, you could offer her a finder's fee for like just 100,000 bucks. You can get her out of prison.
Mm,
It's
yeah.
she needs, I guess, whoever she isn't thinking the way the modern world works. You would think, you would think a scammer would understand the Trump administration. Oh, I know these people. I know how they work. You just bribe them. How hard is this?
And yeah, and she was hanging around with people, DC types, right? Politicians,
Yeah,
people that had a lot of clout
yeah,
in government.
yeah. Gee, I mean, I know there are like image consultants and there are like people that help you deal with scandals. Well,
Right.
like any of them could like just help you find out who to bribe and how much it's going to cost and get you out of any problem like this.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to recap, she is starting a new business proxied through her husband,
The same
and
business
she's trying
again,
to,
with even the
yeah.
same kind of name, made from the same mythological statement. It's just ridiculous. She's just rerunning the same scam again from inside prison.
But she can't do it, so she has her husband proxying doing it.
You
But
know,
what's going to happen if he raises $100 million that she's after? Is she going to try and control a company from behind in prison?
I
How
think,
does she do the research?
well, you have people on the outside do it. And there's this reminds me of a lot of people that just keep doing the same stupid thing over and over. It's like a bad habit, like an addiction. She just wants to run this scam about blood. It's like you only
Yeah,
remember when I was in medical research, basically, I always had a lot of ideas for all these projects, and I talked to everybody. There was a guy upstairs who always kept secret what he was doing. He said, "I don't want anybody stealing my ideas." And I had discussions about this. I said, "I have a lot of ideas. I don't care if people steal my ideas. I've got more." But apparently, there are people that only have a small number of ideas, and they have to protect them. And Elizabeth Holmes seems to only have one idea. It's just going to keep doing that one thing over and over. You know.
right, right, right. Regardless of what the laws of physics are or laws of science.
Yeah, apparently the new one is also claiming it only needs a little bit of blood from an article I read today. So it's the same thing.
Right, right, right,
And the
right.
question is, can you get a bunch of people to invest in it again when it's already crashed and burned once? Maybe so.
Well, we'll see, won't we? She's not on the outside trying to solicit the money.
The first time she got a lot of people to invest, like major tech figures, major drug companies, drugstores, and everything. A lot of real serious people invested in it. They really believed her the first time. I don't
But
think anybody
but
got
you know what? You
this.
know what they were lacking is they were lacking the people with the science knowledge, science background to say it can't be done. And
Yeah,
and I think it was Safeway or Walgreens, one of them,
yeah.
did hire a consultant that said it can't be done. We don't understand that. We don't have the science. And yet they ignored him and went forward with it anyway.
Well, this to be fair, there
Yeah,
are a lot of things where technology has this great thing, and all the experts say it can't be done. And so, you only get rich by betting on the great thing that's going to work, even when it breaks the existing paradigm. But this is what leads to the whole, do your own research, anti-vax crap.
right, right.
The
So
problem
yeah,
is there are occasionally times when the established ideas are wrong and there's a revolutionary thing. Although I'm not trying to think of a real good example of that. I've
you
heard,
know,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead. Well, I'll tell you with vaccines that happened with the cowpox. So there was a doctor that realized that the women doing the milking of the cows
oh,
wouldn't get smallpox.
oh yeah, yeah,
And so he's the one that went around, and there was a big campaign against him to say, no, he's got it all wrong, yet the people were living. But, he had at least proof that people were surviving smallpox.
right. I can think back then when people were kind of unclear even about the germ theory of disease and stuff. Remember, that was like malaria, when they thought it was in the air.
Right.
It was really the mosquitoes, and it took a while to prove that. So yeah, back then there were a lot of misconceptions that were overthrown. I'm not sure I can think of a recent example where the established science was so wrong that there was actually a product that would make a lot of money by breaking the rules. I
Could
Tesla. I mean, there was a belief before Tesla came, people thought you could never sell an electric car because they were too impractical and that he thought he could make a really sexy sports car that was electric because of the high acceleration available and took what was considered to be a defect of electric cars and made it into an asset. So I mean, to some extent, he broke the rules. The big car
Well,
manufacturers,
he didn't break the rules because
well,
electric cars had been around 100 years prior.
sure, but all the big car manufacturers had failed to market them and make money off them. They hadn't figured out a way to package it into a product that people actually wanted. So,
Well, right, but that's the same with Kodak, where Kodak came up with the first digital camera, and they said, "We can't sell that. We sell film."
well, yeah, this is why, but I'm saying if they had paid a consultant, the consultant would say, no, people have tried this and it's never going to work. And yet there was a way to make it work.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's maybe akin to remote or telepathic viewing,
oh,
where
if that actually worked, you'd make a lot of money.
yeah, because you'd be able to see in a casino what the face down cards are.
Oh, sure, you'd be able to do detective work better. The cops should be able to, there'd be a million applications if you could get that working.
Right. But, my point is the science shows that that's not possible with the technology that we currently have.
Well, now we have like NMR brain scans and stuff. I mean, in fact, some limited forms of telepathy are actually working now, like good lie detectors and stuff. There will come a time when they can stick some gadget on your head and tell what you're thinking. We can already do it a little bit. That's not ruled out by science. That will eventually be possible, like Neuralink, Elon Musk's thing. Stick an implant in your brain, connect it to a computer, and then we can see what you're thinking. We can maybe even control what you're thinking, run it back.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
those things are not precluded by science. They're just beyond our current technological capacity.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We don't have the current, or we don't have the technology currently to do it.
Yeah.
And another one that I'll come up with that I just read about was let's see, the Human Genome Project.
Yeah.
And the Human Genome Project, it was thought it was impossible because what you're trying to do is analyze the DNA.
Oh, well, I remember about 30 years ago, they said it is possible. It's like a moonshot. It will take like 20 years. And then they got it done in like 3 or 5 years.
And you know how that was done? This is kind of interesting story.
Well, I know,
So,
go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, so to be able to read the DNA, you have to unravel it. It's like a big ball of string. And
Yeah.
so if you use increase in temperature, the DNA will separate into a strand. And then you have the proteins that can go along and read the DNA. The
Yeah.
problem is the proteins are heat sensitive, and it was thought that that with DNA, any organism about above 135 degrees could not exist. And in the 1960s, there was somebody that went out and did research in Yellowstone and found temperature or high temperature living bacteria that can survive at 160, 170 degrees
Yeah.
Fahrenheit. So here we had this discovery that was made back in the 60s. And then when we started working on a genome project, there was a person at UC Berkeley that was kind of driving around and realized he was the one who did that research and kind of put the two of them together. And that's how we have the Human Genome Project.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So, without his research done years earlier, decades earlier, we wouldn't have been able to do it. And yeah, he's responsible for PCR, if you know what that is.
Yeah. I mean, polymerase chain reaction or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So this is
And what,
basic research. People don't
yeah,
study like some strange thing like butterflies, and they're cutting it all in the United States. But this is why you need a lot of that, because
right,
for every 100 studies like that, two or three of them will turn out to be really useful, and the rest will just be curiosity items. But you never know.
right. You never know. And that's why we fund scientific research
Yeah.
because you don't know.
Yeah, I remember one I read about years ago. Bears hibernate for like 3 or 6 months, and their bone density does not go down. They say if we could figure out how this works, we could cure osteoporosis, which makes sense. But so far, I
Right.
haven't figured it out. But it does seem like a good idea. Find out how
Yeah.
it work.
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah.
All
All
right.
right, Sam, you got another story?
Nope, I'm all done.
All right. I'm done too for today.
Okay.
Join, we'll resume on Tuesday.
Yeah, it should be good. I'll be back in California then.
All right. Good. Have fun. Where are you?
I'm in North Carolina at Kakalaki So I'm just about to
Cackalack.
go teach a machine learning class, and I had to update all my projects. Boy, the Python, this is why Linux sucks. Python-based projects and the current Python environments, nothing works. So I finally made a virtual machine with an old Python environment. It's the only way to get half of this stuff to work anymore. But I managed to
Nice.
find workarounds. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice that we have virtual machines that we could do that.
Oh, yeah. I remember. I think it was Virtual PC 2004, Microsoft came out with. And I said, why would you want that? And then, like, after a week or so, I said, boy, this is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
And I never back.
Yeah.
Well, I use them incredibly since then.
So Microsoft didn't come up with virtual PC. They bought it, but they
Yeah.
marketed and it's now turned into Hyper-V.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, now I mostly use VMware, but it really is great. It changed
Yeah.
everything. I remember I gave a talk years ago at a layer one, and I literally brought 7 laptops to set up
Right.
straight.
Yep.
They don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. I'm
All
turning.
right, Sam, we'll resume on Tuesday. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody.